What's going on? This is TJ Murphy, and welcome to another episode of Adventurous Entrepreneurs. This is a very special episode because my guest today is someone I grew up with. We played high school football together, and this person is someone I've looked up to and admired for a very long time because of his entrepreneurial spirit and passion for adventure and traveling the world. Christian Ostmo is a multi-passionate serial entrepreneur who, at the age of 17, had already started down the entrepreneurial path by outsourcing his daily tasks working for a major web development company to a VA in another country, while he also held down a job at a sandwich shop in our small town of Ashland, Oregon. This passion for optimizing for efficiency allowed him to earn multiple income streams from various jobs simultaneously, while still in high school and early on in his career, eventually having a hand in starting dozens of businesses, many of which are generating income for his family today. Just a few of the golden takeaways Christian shares in this episode are how he has been able to maximize profitability by creating systems that make life more efficient, how COVID destroyed his most successful business venture, brought him down to his last $400, unable to support his family, and how through sheer tenacity, he was able to get things back on track by gaming the DoorDash, Grub Hub, and Uber Eats delivery model and creating a system that allowed him to earn over $12,000 in 1 month and get back on track to building new successful businesses and passive income streams over the past 3 years. So, without further ado, please enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with Christian Ostmo. Welcome to the Adventurous Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, TJ Murphy. Since quitting my corporate 9-to-5 and starting a business while backpacking through Asia back in early 2017, I've had the privilege of learning from some incredibly adventurous entrepreneurs. Through these conversations and my own journey, I've learned that much like in life, entrepreneurship is an adventure. On this podcast, I explore the journeys of top-performing leaders in their fields. These wide-ranging conversations include tactical business advice, how I built this insights, lessons in leadership, life hacks, travel stories, favorite hobbies, and insights into living a purposeful and joy-filled life. Adventures await us, so let's dive in. Hey, Christian. Welcome to Adventurous Entrepreneurs.
Hey, TJ. Thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, man. Excited for you to be here.
Yeah, same.
So for starters, since you and I graduated high school, you've been on an incredible journey in business and in life. Can you tell us a little bit about your story and how you became the adventurous entrepreneur you are today?
Well, I mean, it does date back, a long time ago to high school, I guess. I started a web design company, like pretty much right out of high school. I don't know do you remember when I worked at Pita Pit?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. So I worked at Pita Pit and I literally brought my laptop behind the counter, and when it wasn't busy, I built websites.
Yep.
And I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but that was what I did. I worked at fast food, and then behind the counter, I worked on websites. And then after I graduated from high school, I went off to college, and I continued that. I got one like telecommuting web development job. And the fact that it was telecommuting, I quickly realized that it means I can do it from anywhere. I think that they kind of assumed that I was in the US, but I moved to Mexico. And so, no, I mean, that's kind of where it all begins. I got a job, I moved to Mexico, did it from there. I started outsourcing pretty much straight away. I was like 19, 20 years old, something like that. And it was just, that's it. I've traveled, I've been to around 40 some odd countries. I've lived in about 6. I've been all over, done dozens of different businesses now. And I suppose that's it.
Yeah, no, and so you touched on something that I want you to elaborate a little bit more on. So
sure.
I think you told me a story, and this might have been the telecommuting job where you were working at Pita Pit or that you'd moved to Mexico, but you outsourced like all of the work, right?
Yeah. So I had this job. Most of my job was essentially to migrate websites from my clients, from an old host to a new host. Essentially, my client was a web host, that had their own like content management system and stuff like that. And my job was just to migrate all of their new clients' websites into their new system. And it didn't take me long to realize that like any dummy can do this job. It doesn't take a web developer, right? So yeah, I outsourced. I found somebody on Freelancer to just do all the work for me, and I just kind of lived it up, I suppose, in Mexico, Central America, and lived my best life, I suppose.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's very in line with a book I read years ago, like The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. Basically,
No doubt.
how to outsource your work. And I know it's something that's a lot more common, even in salaried roles these days, where people are taking on dual salaries and hiring freelancers in other countries to do the bulk of the work. And I think that's an entrepreneurial venture, even if you don't own your own business.
Definitely, even if you don't take it any further than that. I mean, that's something worth celebrating for sure. I mean, something that takes a little bit of outside the box thinking.
Yeah, some ingenuity, and that's allowed you to do some pretty amazing things, like you said, traveling the world, starting multiple businesses, and we'll get into some of those, I'm sure. But tell me a little bit about where things are at for you today. What has your focus right now?
So it took me a very long time to realize that this should be my core business. First of all, my wife and I, we have like a dozen different businesses doing various things. But our main moneymaker is sort of an outsource agency slash VA company, however you want to call it. I like to call it an outsource company because VA has a certain connotation that they do admin work and stuff like that. But so we have an outsource agency, and it came from that initial period in my life where I realized I could make money, I could bring it in, I could get a job and outsource it. And I'll tell you what, that book that you mentioned, The 4 Hour Work Week, the first time I read it, I was already outsourcing. I was quite literally working the 4 Hour Work Week before I ever read the book. But when I read the book, it kind of like expanded. I don't know. It kind of like changed the way I looked at it even more than it did before, because I was hiring this guy who barely spoke English, and he's doing a job just like migrating content over. But when Tim Ferriss, when he talks about like outsourcing emails and admin work and stuff like that, it takes like a totally different type of person that I don't even think that I thought was possible, right? If that makes sense. And so when I read that book, it did kind of change the way I did things. And we added more businesses, we added more employees, we added different roles, which I had kind of seen it more as a development thing because the language isn't such a barrier. But I mean, the way that everything's evolved over the last decade or so, it's expanded so much, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely has. It's easier than ever before to connect with people from around the world and source great talent and collaborate, and also, like you're saying, start dozens of businesses that can provide a very great lifestyle for you and your family. And this podcast is about entrepreneurship, but one of the biggest hurdles that most successful entrepreneurs face at one time or another, myself included, is living a well-rounded life and doing the things that bring them the most joy with the people that they care about most. What does living that well-rounded life look like for you with so much going on, including being a husband and having children?
No, totally, 100%. Actually, I think that's by far the most important thing. And so if I had to talk about what a well-rounded life looks like, I'll be honest, work like barely even makes it into that list. Because it's like, I mean, being a good husband, being a good dad, it means spending a lot of time with your family, and work is the thing that we spend, the majority of our time on. So I think personally, my specific role, my kind of philosophy, I suppose, is I try to minimize everything. There obviously, you have to make a living, you have to make money, and we all have passions that we want to follow. My job is sort of to help people minimize the things that have to be done that they don't want to do. And so, like, for me, for what a well-rounded life looks like is spending as much time as I can with my family, minimizing the things that need to get done, that that have to get done, while at the same time kind of following curiosity, following passion. I think that for me, at least, work and personal life go hand in hand. I don't really, personally, I don't really think that I don't believe in a work-life balance. It doesn't really work for me. We have one company called Learning Tail, which is we produce like videos and educational content for kids. And so like, that's like, I'm going to say our third most important company. I don't know exactly what order they go in, but that goes like, that's so ingrained in part of my everyday life. It's like every facet, because I'm with my kids all the time. We homeschool them, by the way. I guess I didn't mention that. We homeschool our kids. And so this like Learning Tail is just like part of our everyday journey. And so in virtual assistant company isn't quite the same, because I'm separated from them more when I'm working on that sort of thing. But that's kind of how I see work. I think that, as to the extent possible, work and personal life, they kind of go hand in hand, if that makes sense. Try to minimize the things that take you away from your family, and try to do more of the things that allow you to sort of follow your passions, follow where you want to put your time. And so that's what I think a well-rounded life looks like to me. There's no like clear-cut definition, but in essence, spending more time on the things that you really want to spend time on.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's one of the things that I admire most about you, Christian, is that you've intentionally engineered your life to optimize for efficiency. And
Yeah.
that's really allowed you to focus on the core pillars in life that are most important to you, namely health, family, cultural enrichment, and human connection, rather than just working on a business for the sake of growing it into being an immensely profitable thing. Not that that's bad, but what is that without the other pillars in
No,
place?
absolutely. No, I tell people this on my YouTube channel. I have absolutely no intention of becoming fabulously wealthy. It's not even like on my list of things. Like, of course, if it happens naturally, it happens naturally, but I wouldn't sacrifice. There's very, very little that I would sacrifice that I have now, for being rich, for gathering wealth, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Yeah. And I'm with you there. And I think, we all have different goals. We all have different reasons why we start businesses. And it's okay to want to be amazingly wealthy
No, no,
and build a
absolutely.
super profitable business. But
Hmm.
I don't know, for me, definitely having that not work-life balance, and somebody I met with just last week put it even better. It's like a work-life blend. Like inevitably
Yeah,
the two are intermingled all the time, and things
yeah,
are going to go bad at work that are going to translate into your at-home life with your family, with your kids, with your
yeah.
friends. And you've got to be able to design your life and your
Mm,
business to be able to have positive outcomes when those things happen, and still have
yeah,
time to, at least in my case, like go on adventures, go mountain biking, go hiking with friends, all the things that fill me up that allow me to actually be productive and create quality work and quality experiences when I'm in
totally.
business mode.
Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. That sounds great.
And part of our focus at this podcast is looking at entrepreneurship through the lens of being a grand adventure. And in every great adventure story, there is a guide or mentor who leads the hero down the path to reach their goal. And
Hmm.
are there any mentors or influential people in your life that come to mind that have helped really shape you into the adventurous entrepreneur you are today?
I'm gonna say there's one sort of in a good way, and one sort of in a bad way. Um, the bad one, I think, is my dad, and not to say that he himself is bad in any way. Um, However, I've seen my dad like fail again and again and again and again, oftentimes in exactly the same way. It's like he never learns from his mistakes, right? He never creates that security. Not to say it's not bad. My dad, it makes my dad sound really bad, but
No, you're fine, man.
my parents grew up, you know, in Eagle Point. They're very poor, um, poorly educated as well. I think that what my dad and my parents in particular, I mean, sorry, both my parents have accomplished is really admirable. But I do see my dad getting taken advantage of. I do see my dad making the same types of mistakes over and over and over again. I do see my dad not creating the kind of security that I would want for my own family. I mean, I feel like he's in a worse position than I am, even though he's, you know, in his 50s now. And so I know with, you know, in the core of my being that I don't want to be there. I don't want to. The other thing is also, like, when I was growing up, he spent all of his time working, like
Mhm.
literally all of his time. And I just remember being a little kid, um, wanting to spend time with my dad, and it was like he was there, but to a certain extent he wasn't there. And I don't want to be that person for my kids, because I think it's too easy to fall into that trap of just like working, working, working all the time, not having time for your family, not having time for your kids. For the record, I don't blame my dad. I think that um, he's made leaps and bounds, and where I am is only possible because of, you know, the progress that he's made. Um, but for my decision for my own life, I don't want to be there. I don't want my kids to experience that. And so um, I've decided not to make the same mistakes. I take a critical look at the way that he lived his life, and I've decided that I don't want to live the same. I don't want to work for a salary. Uh, I don't want to depend on one single stream of income. I don't want to depend on other people, like to the extent that they're like a business paying me or whatever. Don't want to depend on a salary, because I'll be honest, my dad is one of the best software developers probably in the country. And when he lost his job, he worked for a company in ShareFaith, and they kind of went under. They got like bankruptcy and then bought and sold, whatever.
Mhm.
When they went under and they laid everybody off, he spent years looking for a job. And I just think to myself, it was through the pandemic and everything, so it was kind of, I guess it was hard for a lot of people. But I do think that there are certain things that you just can't predict in this world, and being dependent on that salary, on that company, is just, it doesn't make any sense to me. And so in that respect, I see my dad as an influence for, to an extent, the person I want to be: hardworking, loving. But on the other hand, the person I don't want to be, you know, too focused on like one thing, on a salaried position, on whatever it was, and on working like 100 hours a week, which is what he did, what he still does. Um, on the other hand, the person that I think is incredibly influential in my own life is my wife. And when I met her, it was just, she's a totally different type of person than anybody I've ever met before. And I don't just say that because she's my wife. She takes anything and just thinks about every single possibility, everything it could be. Like, to give you an example, she was living here in London before we met, and she was a shot girl, which is somebody who goes around and like sells shots or whatever, to people in a bar. Um, she didn't just like stop at being a shot girl. She like went and created her own shot girl agency, because like that was just what she wanted to do. She was like, this is cool and everything, but like, where does it go from here? And so she's just like, one day she just opens up an agency, walks around to different bars and says, I can offer you, like, she didn't even have people to work for her yet, but she's like going around to the bars saying, I'll get somebody to come work for you. and
Wow.
and so she's basically created like a temp agency in an afternoon, just by walking around. And so that's the type of person that I want to be, where you're just always thinking about possibilities, always thinking about ways to get to the next step, ways to improve your position. And I think that all throughout our relationship, as long as I've known her, she's always been that person. And I I've increasingly become that person, but I'm not where she is. I'm still held back by all of my preconceived notions about everything. Yeah, no, I think that she's everything that I want to be.
And I think there's clearly some yin to the yang there between the two of you, and synergy that creates. And of course, having somebody that's not only your partner in life, but a business partner and your partner in raising children, and you guys are working together on all these amazing things. There's not much more that I could really hope for in life. And of course, I'm lucky to have a wonderful woman
Yeah, yeah, of course.
in my life as well, who is a lot of those things for me. But I do think, and I've seen you guys through your travels and adventures over the years, and it's always been inspiring to me, man. So I just
No,
want to
thank you.
say,
Appreciate it.
keep it up. You're shining a very bright light into the world.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Christian, how is going down a wrong path at some time in your business, or an apparent failure in life, set you up to climb to even greater heights than you thought you could? Because I'm sure there's been
Yeah,
a lot of directions over the years with throughout your travels and business ventures, and not all of them
yeah,
gone right. So
yeah. So there is one that is like screamingly obvious. And I don't know how much you know about my past in the last 10 years, but I had a company, or have a company still, called Pick Your Photo. I'm a photographer. I don't know if I'm still a photographer. I don't know if I count anymore, but um, but we started Pick Your Photo back in like 2017. It grew over time. We kind of had a different approach. I won't go into it because it's not that important, but we grew over time. It was more of a tech company than anything else. But the pandemic hit. First of all, I have to say that by every metric, Pick Your Photo was a wild success. It was great. It was probably, up until I started this virtual assistant agency, this outsourcing agency, it was probably the most successful business I've had. But then the pandemic hit, and I don't know if you know, but in London, pretty much everything was locked down. It was essentially illegal to go outside your house except for a handful of reasons. And they kept saying, just like everybody kept saying, they kept saying that the pandemic, the everything's going to end, everything's going to reopen. And there was a period in, like, I want to say like August of 2020, something like that. They did reopen, but then cases shot up, and they shut everything back down again. I was effectively out of work. I had a staff in Mexico who were working on, lots of different things. I had a couple of photographers under me here in London as well. And we were basically paying a bunch of salaries and not working. We had about 9 months runway, which is great. I'm super lucky to have that, right?
that's huge.
And we just kind of sat tight, because we were like, everybody's saying the pandemic's going to be over and London's going to open back up and we're going to be back in business and everything's great. But then it wasn't. About 6 months into the pandemic, I really started to panic, because obviously we've got so much money going out the door. We let go of most of our staff, except for a couple of people in Mexico City. And then it just kept going. We were basically out of money. I was taking odd jobs here in London, but I think what was really difficult is I was applying for like even minimum wage positions, and I got a couple of bones thrown to me here and there, odd jobs, whatever, but I wasn't even getting interviews for like barista positions. And it was just like, it was incredibly difficult. And there came a point in like December of 2020 where I was down to my last, I want to say like 300 pounds or so, which is like, I don't know, like $400 or something. And I made a decision. It was really, really difficult. But, the thing is, I think I've been that broke before. But there was something, I had never been that broke since having kids.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something really, really, it's more than like, I'm not quite sure what I'm trying to say, but it was almost like I had failed, not just at the business, I had failed at life, right? Because I'm like sorry,
Oh, you're
Uh,
good then. You're
not even able to put food on the table for my kids.
yeah.
And it's just like the most I don't want to say degrading. I'm not trying to be there. I'm not trying to something along those lines.
Yeah. It's a hard situation to be in. I can't even begin to imagine not having kids myself, but being in a
Yeah.
position where you're not able to put that food on the table and having to
We-
figure it out, which obviously you did. So,
yeah. It came down to the line. I sold my computer, which was super counterintuitive because that's how I make any income at all.
yeah.
And I used that money to buy a plane ticket back to Oregon. One plane ticket. I went by myself, which which is a whole nother story. But the very next day, I got in at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and the next day at 6 a.m. I was out there delivering DoorDash, which I couldn't do here in London because you have to. There are like all these weird rules, which is why I went there because I could get started the next day. Um, and it was a humbling experience at first. It was incredibly difficult, but we made it through. I was borrowing my brother's car. I had no computer, and I would say that was my lowest point, probably ever. But then things kind of changed from there. I signed up. I don't know if you follow my YouTube channel or anything, but I kind of talk about this a little bit. Um, I signed up to Grub Hub and DoorDash and Uber Eats, and I ended up making a small fortune, which was great. Which was great. Going from literally my lowest point to basically coming up with a strategy to put about 50 grand in my pocket, was just
Wow.
like it was just like just a totally different thing. I bought it the next week. I bought a car. The week after that, I bought a computer again. I sent money back to my family, but obviously I was still didn't see them for, I don't know, 6 months. They came and visited me at one point in time. I flew them everybody over. um, Man, where was I going with that?
Well, quick interruption there. How did you
Yeah, yeah.
make, well, how long did it take to make 50 grand with
About
the,
six months.
wow, okay. And
So
what was your secret sauce? Were you just working all day, every day, delivering food?
Well, okay, so I signed up. I signed up for DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats, all three of them, and I kind of developed a system, I suppose, where I would essentially take. This is gonna sound. People are gonna hate me for this if they ever get DoorDash, but but essentially, I take Grubhub, Uber Eats, and DoorDash all at the same time. I'm really selective about what I take, and I try to take all of them at the same time. It's a balancing act of like timing and everything. Um, but I basically turned it into a $35 an hour job, and I worked about 12 hours a day for a long time. I made my video that's on YouTube about it is actually I made $12,000 in my last month. So that was like the best I ever did. So I've got like kind of a two-part answer to like how this sort of changed me for the better, I suppose, to greater heights. Greater heights, that's what you said, right?
Yep. Yep.
The first one is I realized that because I've had successful businesses in the past, right? And none of them have failed so spectacularly as that. Now, I could not have predicted the pandemic, so I don't want to blame myself for that too
Yeah.
much.
None of us.
But yeah, yeah. But it did make me realize that I mean, I always knew this, of course, but it doesn't strike you until something really bad happens sometimes. That there are things that you just can't predict, and I was putting all of my eggs into this one basket essentially, and that so I realized at that point in time, it was actually about halfway through those 9 months is when I realized this. I was like, "Man, I'm actually really screwed." And I started turning Pick Your Photo into what it is now, which is a platform for photographers. So a photographer can sign up to Pick Your Photo for $100 a month, and essentially has all the software that I built for myself back then. Um, and so I realized that having that sort of subscription model creates a little bit more security for me against something like the pandemic. or anything else that I can't predict in the future. The
Yep.
second thing is that I started contributing to my stock video portfolio, which stock videos, like if you go on Shutterstock or whatever and buy a video, I would get, if you bought one of my videos, I would get a cut of it. And so I have this huge stock media portfolio that has, like, I don't know, 20,000 assets or something like that. That creates, sort of a blanket. It's like a passive income blanket. And so those two things together allowed me to kind of diversify my money. And I realized about halfway through that 9 months that I really needed to diversify. I needed to diversify, have more than one stream of income, and I needed to have at least one of them that is entirely passive, which ended up being my stock media portfolio. And I'm really happy to say that has worked out. It didn't work out during those 9 months, but now it's kind of providing that security, more than I need at the moment. And so I'm really happy about that, and I think that I will probably never let that go. I think I'm going to continue contributing to my stock portfolio, even though I don't really need it anymore.
Yeah.
It's funny how those things happen, isn't it? Where it only comes back to you once you don't really need it anymore.
Yeah. But what a great safety net to have in that moment. And
Yeah,
I
no
mean,
doubt.
clearly, dude, the tenacity that it took to, not just fold, but do what you had to do, move back to Oregon, go and deliver food on DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grub Hub, do what you already had honed amazing skills in, how to optimize and create something that works more efficiently than the average person might go about doing it.
Yeah.
Be able to ultimately create a big chunk of money and set
Yeah.
yourself back on a stable path to continue to thrive and be the startup creator that you are.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, definitely.
and we
The
can't predict those things. So go
yeah,
ahead.
definitely not. The second thing that I did that really set me on what I guess I'll call the right path is I started my YouTube channel, which I didn't have one before. I had a few videos up there, but nothing really serious. I knew from the beginning that I wanted to create content in sort of the entrepreneurship niche. I didn't really know how to go about it. However, when I did that $12,000 month, the next day I moved back down to Mexico temporarily with my family. It's a long story, but they were in the U.S. for 3 months. My wife can only be in the U.S. for 3 months at a time, so we all went down to Mexico after that instead of back to London, because she's not American, right?
Yeah.
just for clarity.
Good to put that out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a criminal or anything. Just doesn't have a reason.
Yeah, exactly. And so we went down to Mexico right after that, and the very next day I recorded this video. I broke down point by point my strategy on how I made $12,000 in my last month doing deliveries. And that video made it pretty big. It's not like crazy or anything, but it's up to 125,000 views or something like that.
Wow.
And so it kind of pushed me into this position that I would definitely not have otherwise been in, where I've got a solid foundation. And what I realized from those group of people is there's a really, really big chunk of them that are sort of in this entrepreneur, small business, niche. They're interested in that kind of content, which is always what I wanted to make content about. So, for the record, I've been doing these. I've had a VA agency for years. I used to do it under the brand name of my company, my web design company, Osmosis Labs. But early in this year, I've had some like ongoing clients, like virtual assistant clients. Early on in this year, I kind of floated on my YouTube channel the idea of separating the two and kind of saying, I've got a new VA agency or remote worker agency. If there are any entrepreneurs who need, this kind of thing, these people are trained. I've been working with them for years, some of them for years, some of them for shorter amounts of time. And it struck a chord with a lot of people, because I think that there were a lot of people who were already watching my some of them were watching the DoorDash videos, some of them were watching my older content, who were quite interested in in outsourcing, who had maybe been in the entrepreneurship or small business niches for a long time, and maybe had even read the 4-Hour Workweek, or who had tried outsourcing in the past and it just didn't really work out for them. Outsourcing is really hard, actually. I've been through, I'm gonna say, this is gonna sound really bad, but I fire like 90% of the people that I hire, and it's not because I'm an asshole or anything. It's because
Definitely not. You're a nice guy.
it's because it's hard. It's hard to find qualified people, especially people that you'd never meet in person, and especially people in a foreign country where sometimes they do or don't speak the language. It has its own challenges, and so I do think that some people get really wrapped up in the story of the 4-Hour Workweek, and they think it kind of makes everything look really easy. Of course, just like all content does. Yeah. And then they fail at it, and so there are loads of these people who are kind of maybe a little bit disenfranchised, who seemed really interested in this service, where I've already trained and vetted tons of people who I can hire out for lots of different tasks.
Yeah, that's an amazing service, and I'm actually looking forward to continuing the conversation about it. I think it's something that we'll be able to utilize as well. So. Knowing everything that you've learned throughout this amazing entrepreneurial journey, from the highest of highs to pretty low lows during those COVID times, what advice would you give yourself back when you were, well, very early on, I guess, about to embark on your first venture, probably at like 17, 18, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I think that the first piece of advice that I would give, I like to say my 20-year-old self, the video that I'm publishing in an hour is titled something along the lines of something about getting into my 30s and what advice I'd give myself, my 20-year-old self. So basically, the first one is that there are no rules in entrepreneurship. I think that we all, not all of us, but we coach each other, and we watch videos, and we listen to podcasts and watch YouTube videos, etc. And there's obviously some recurring themes, and sometimes people think that those are rules, and they kind of regurgitate the same information that they've been told as if it's like fact or something like that. And so, excuse me, the biggest rule that I hear all the time that I think is baloney is that you should only focus on one business at a time. And I think that when I was 20, I was super into that. Like I said, I had a web design company I started when I was like 19. And there were a couple of times where I sort of gave that up to go work for other companies, where I would work for a company for like, work for a company, or I would usually join, there were two different companies that I joined partnerships with somebody else. And they both failed after about 2 years. And I think that the problem that I have with this rule is that it's just so unpredictable. There's 90% of businesses will fail. That's just statistics, right? And so to think that you're going to devote, 2 or 3 years to something that's ultimately going to fail, I'm not trying to say that you'll never get anything out of them, even if they fail, but the idea of that to me is terrifying. And I did that twice, essentially devoted 2 years of my life into something that ultimately failed. And so it wasn't until after that I really started launching multiple businesses at the same time. And I've realized that, at least for me, that works way better. Because the thing is that I only have, I think I have 12 businesses. I think only 5 of them are actually generating revenue. Those other 7, they might at some point in the future, and any one of those 5 can go down and I would still have income coming in, right? And statistically speaking, they probably will eventually. So it's kind of like, to an extent, there's this numbers game. Do you know Y Combinator?
Yeah.
We applied for Y Combinator with Pick Your Photo early on.
I didn't realize that.
And we got really involved in their whatever their pre-program was. I can't remember what it was called. But they go over and over and over again about how you need to be 100% devoted to this one business. And I totally get from their perspective that that's what they want, because that's going to create, you know, an increased chance of success for the one business, right? But not for the individuals.
Hmm.
Um, and that's, I think that when you look at Y Combinator, their philosophy is not, you know, focused. Their philosophy for themselves, for the leadership um, is not focused on one thing. It's place a lot of small bets. That's kind of what they say in their handbook, is what they do. And I think it is hard for your average person to place a lot of small bets, um, but it is still possible. And I think that that's more or less what I aim to do. So if I had to, sorry, to go back, if I had to tell my 20-year-old self what to do, what advice, I would say don't listen, like not just that rule, but any rules. Anybody who says that this is what you have to do, don't listen to them. You have to figure it out for yourself. There's really no other way to do it, because they just don't apply the same to everybody, and they don't apply to every era either. You know, maybe 30 years ago would have been different. But things are different now. They're just not the same. The second thing, sorry, I've got a few of these.
Oh,
Um,
it's a lot of
uh,
great insights in here because no
yeah.
doubt not every situation is the same and
Mhm.
things change rapidly. So
Definitely
please
huge.
continue.
Yeah, no, I was going to say the second thing is that there is only so much preparation you can do. Preparation in general has kind of diminishing returns. I'm not saying don't be prepared for whatever, but there's often this encouragement for people to be, I don't know, they've got to have their business plan together, and they've got to have this and that, the right education or whatever. And I'm not trying to say any of those things are bad, but what the only thing that has ever made a difference for me is taking action, taking the first step. And if I can give an example, my wife and I started this flower business, an artificial flower business. Everything looked great on paper. I could have thrown up a 5-year business plan that made you think we were going to be millionaires in a year, right? Um, but the truth is that we took our initial investment. It was about 250 pounds, tiny, right? Just
Yep.
just a little cash to try it out. Um, and what we realized is that the way that people bought the flowers, they were buying like huge varieties. And so we had to have in stock pretty much every variety. It's not like you can buy 250 roses and then just wait until they sell and then buy another 250 roses. You have to like buy a huge variety of things. So we were just about ready to put down another investment of about 5,000 pounds. We were going to go to the warehouse in the Netherlands to see, see the product, and place our order. We were pretty much ready to do that, but when we were running the numbers, we realized that as soon as we put down this 5,000 pounds, we're essentially committing to another 20,000 pounds, like in 3 months, something like that. And I just think for us, there is no way that we could have known that we were going to have to invest 20,000 pounds to make a profit if we had not taken that first step and paid the 250 pounds. There's no amount of being prepared that could have told us that. And um, sorry, where was I going with that?
No, I mean, I think you're onto something there that so many miss. Like, yes,
Yeah.
we can have everything well thought out. We can
Mhm.
check every box and have this amazing plan. But until
Yeah.
we actually take action on that
Yeah.
plan, we're not going to find out what could go wrong or the things that we thought we knew that actually didn't turn out to be true.
Totally, totally. And essentially, I mean, that's what you have to do, is you have to take that step. Otherwise you'll never know. And there are tons of people. I don't know if it's I spend a lot more time in the entrepreneurship communities here in London than I do in Oregon. Um, but there is a huge problem here in London where people pretty much prepare. They'll like say they're going to do something sometimes for years. And it's just like that idea, it lives in your head forever. You think in 10 years you'll look back and you'll say, I had that idea 10 years ago and it could have been a success. And then you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Truth is, it might not have been a success, but you'll never know because you didn't do it.
Paralysis by analysis, right?
Yeah, pretty much. So if I had to give myself, my 20-year-old self, any advice, I would say, yeah, prepare, but take action sooner rather than later.
I love
Okay.
it. And it's sound advice. Do you
Yeah.
go ahead, continue,
Yeah,
please.
no. Sorry, I've got another one. I've
Go
actually got
for it.
at least one. Let's see. Um, the last one, not the last one, sorry. The next one is that it's knowing when to quit is a very valuable skill and not a weakness. I think that we tell ourselves, we tell each other that, people, I don't know, winners don't quit and quitters don't win. But I think that that's not true. I think that quitters win more often. I think that when people know when to quit, it means that it's time to move on to something else. In the video, I say this that I'm about to publish, I say this a little bit differently. I say know when the investment isn't worth it anymore, instead of when to quit, because quit's got a negative connotation, right?
Yeah.
But I think that this thought that we're taught in grade school about never quitting, never giving up, it kind of, to an extent, it does translate to business. You need that tenacity in order to get what you want. But at the same time, there is a certain point when it's not worth it anymore, and you should be moving on to something else. That's what I would tell my 20-year-old self. I think that I stuck too long in certain things that were never going to work out, and that I, wish that I hadn't. I suppose that's all.
You got to know when to fold them, right?
yeah. I guess I could have put it that way, huh? No one to hold them, no one to fold them. The last one that I have is that when I was 20, I put way too much stock into what YouTubers, podcasters, whoever had a mic, I would listen to tons of audiobooks and not to say that any of that is bad, but I think if I were talking to my 20-year-old self right now, I'd say take everything with a grain of salt, because there's so many people out there who are, if not financially incentivized to exaggerate things, then sometimes they just flat out lie to you. There's a lot of BS out there. It's mostly BS, to be honest.
Yeah, and for sure, there's gold nuggets out there, but
yeah,
it's a big world of BS as well.
Totally. And so I think that that's a skill too, is learning how to identify, the gold nuggets from the BS. But yeah, no, those are my main points, I would say. The main things that I would tell myself.
Yeah, and I think they're great words of wisdom that even now we should all heed and take for real, because in life, especially with the last one, there is so much, and what you see on social media is somebody's best day or the filter that shows the beautiful face, when in fact there's a lot of stuff hiding behind that mask that we don't get to see. And if we only focus on how easy it is for some, it's so easy to fall into a mental trap that doesn't help you get to where you want to go. So reading between the lines, it's huge, man. Awesome, Christian. Well, dude, I really appreciate everything that you've shared with us today. And for our audience, where can people find you online? Website, socials, things like that?
Yeah. Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me on. You can find me. So I've got a YouTube channel. It's Call Me Lil. Call me and Lil. Lil is my nickname. Stupid. And my company is called Lil Assistants. That's my outsource agency. You can find me there. I'm also on Instagram, just Christian Ostmo, @ChristianOstmo. But yeah, that's pretty much me. I've also got pickyourphoto.com. If anybody out there is a photographer, it could be a good resource. And Learning Tale. Those are my three biggest companies: Pick Your Photo, Lil Assistants, Learning Tale. Learning Tale is kids' educational material.
Awesome, man. Well, people can take their pick or check out all three, and we'll put all that in the show notes for our audience. And
thanks, man.
Christian, my friend, I just really appreciate your time, as always, having followed your journey since we were in high school together. I just want to say that you've been an immensely positive and inspiring influence in my life, and I look forward to continuing to root for you throughout your journey, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you.
To all of our adventurous listeners, thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Please be sure to subscribe, download, and share this on social media or with someone will get some value from it. Leaving a review goes a long way in helping people find the show, and I personally appreciate reading them when they come in. So please go drop one if you have the time. We'll see you all next week, and remember, whether we're talking about business or the things that bring us joy outside of work, life is meant for exploring. So go out there and live it one adventure at a time.